Welcome back to West Texas View.
Before the break, Steve was talking to us about how this foundation of growing up in the late 30s and early 40s with parents that were strong-minded and confident as parents, and how they ran a pretty tight ship. He had lots of chores to do and all of that kind of stuff, but it gave him a great value system. But the other thing he talks about in the first of this book is how the choices we make really decide what our life is going to be about, because our life is our choices. And I want you to tell the story that you told about how a choice that happened between you and your brother made you skip first grade.
Well, yes, you're referring to the story of before I was scheduled to enter the first grade in the fall. I grew up in Nacogdoches, Texas, which is the home of Stephen F. Austin State University, at the time called Stephen F. Austin State Teachers College. And they had a summer program where they were teaching teachers to be how to actually
practice teach.
Practice teach, precisely. And so they recruited kids from the town to enroll in this class, and it was called demonstration school. So my parents thought I, being the youngest of the three boys, should go through this demonstration school, a 6-week program at Stephen F. Austin. So I did. And so when that was over and we started the school that fall, my mother dropped us off at the front. Again, being the third of three, it was no big deal for another kid to start school, right?
Yeah.
So my brother, who was 3 years older than I, just escorted me into the school to the principal's office and basically turned me over to the principal's office, everybody fully expecting that I'd be enrolled in the first grade. Well, they found out that I had successfully completed demonstration school that summer, so they summarily enrolled me in the second grade. So here I am, age 6, starting the second grade, and I didn't know what was going on. They didn't have kindergarten, at least we didn't back in those days, so I'd never...
We didn't even heard of that word.
Exactly. So here I am in the second grade trying to figure out what's going on, and that became a factor in my life in later years in a real sense, in that I'm graduating from high school now at age 17. I'm with my cohort.
A young 17.
Yeah, exactly. My cohort of friends and classmates were all a year older than I. It impacted my athletic participation because I graduated a year earlier than I should have. So ideally I would have had that last year, one more year in athletics, which would have had some impact, and what, I don't know. But it is the result of a circumstance, a choice, as you say, that occurred back in those early years. It wasn't a conscious choice. I didn't make the choice. My parents didn't make the choice. The school administrators did. But nonetheless,
but nevertheless, it made an impact on your life.
Absolutely.
And the interesting thing about that is, even if your parents had found out that it was a mistake, they wouldn't have argued about it. If you were doing okay in the first grade, just go on with it. That's all there is to it. But one of the other things that you talk about in the book is, here you've got 3 brothers.
2 brothers.
Oh, I mean 2 brothers.
Yes.
There's 3 boys in the family and your father, and then there's your little mother over here on the side.
Bless her heart.
So you grew up, instead of in Petticoat Junction, you grew up in Boxer Shark Junction.
Exactly.
And so that impacted your life, in that your mother taught you and the other boys how to cook and clean and wash clothes and do all the things that she would normally teach the girls in the family. So you became very resourceful in that area too, and then you also watched them model frugality and living within their means, and some of those things. Talk about how that impacted your life. You always knew not if you go to college, but when you go to college.
Sure.
And you knew that you'd have to pay for it yourself, that your parents couldn't afford it.
Well, that's right, and there weren't just a whole bunch of scholarships available back in those days.
There was no financial aid
either.
Way before we graduated.
So you managed to you knew in advance that you were going to be holding down a job while going to school, and if you could get the right kind of job with the right kind of hours, you could do that and hopefully make enough to go full time, or if you couldn't go full time, you might spread it out over 5 or 6 years. Of course, spreading it out over 5 or 6 years is kind of the norm, it seems like these days.
Yeah,
but
they look forward to that, don't they? Well, another strange thing in your life that had ramifications all through it was that you talk about how you learned that it doesn't matter what age you are, that you need to listen to people's ideas, and you use it as an example that you were kind of sickly as a child, and nobody knew what it was, and the old country doctor had trouble and was treating you for something else. Tell that story.
Well, our family doctor when I was a kid growing up was getting close to retirement age himself, so if you track that back, you could see that he went through medical school somewhere around the turn of the 19th century. I'm talking
1895 or something.
Yeah, exactly. And so I actually missed 6 weeks of school, both in the 5th and the 6th grade, from some infection that I had that the doctor couldn't quite pin down, and I remember his saying he has to stay in bed until he goes at least 24 hours without fever. Well, that just didn't happen until, as it worked out, the season changed, and so I missed 6 weeks of school both of those years. Well, fortunately for me, old Dr. Middlebrook retired, and a new young Dr. Taylor came to town, and so my parents took me to see him. And I will never forget, we walked into his office, my parents and me, and the doctor said, that boy's got anemia. He's anemic. And so that was part of the issue.
Hadn't even examined you or anything, just looked
nobody
at your
knew
pale
that.
face.
Exactly. And then it turned out that this illness, for which I had been put in bed for 6 weeks 2 different times, was hay fever. Nothing more than hay fever. A sinus infection. And of course, that's so easily treatable, and it just really nothing to it. But it was a big deal back then because that older doctor didn't know, and fortunately the younger one...
He was doing the best he could,
sure
but he
was.
just didn't know.
Sure he was. He was a wonderful man, provided wonderful care, but he just didn't know. And here comes the young guy who's gone through medical school just in the last few years, and all of these modern things, if you can call something in 1945 modern now, were taking place.
We're going to have to take another break. We'll be back in just a minute and continue this conversation.
Stay tuned. West Texas View will be right back.